The forest floor, thick with the damp decay of autumn leaves, offered no softness against Silas Thorne's worn boots. Each step was a quiet protest against the silence that had swallowed his life whole a year past. He moved with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a man for whom haste held no meaning, his eyes, like the gray sky above, holding only distant, unreadable sorrow. The tang of pine and cold earth filled his lungs, a familiar balm and a perpetual ache. He was hunting, not for game, but for the elusive peace that had eluded him since the fever took Alara. His cabin, a half-day's ride back, was merely a roof against the elements, not a home. Then, a sound, faint and impossible, broke through the rustle of the wind. A choked gasp, barely more than a whisper, from beneath a newly turned mound of earth near a cluster of ancient oaks. Silas froze, his hand instinctively gripping the worn axe handle at his side. He listened, his breath held. Again, a strained groan, unmistakable in its human agony. Disbelief warred with a cold, creeping dread. It was no animal caught in a snare. He moved, cautiously at first, then with a surge of desperate urgency, dropping to his knees beside the disturbed soil. He began to dig, clawing at the loose earth with bare hands, the coarse soil tearing at his calloused fingers. Minutes bled into an eternity. His heart hammered, an unwelcome drumbeat in the quiet woods. First, a flicker of white fabric, soiled and torn. Then, a hand, pale and small, emerging from the dirt, fingers curled in a desperate claw. Silas dug faster, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. The outline of a face began to appear, then shoulders, a torso. It was a woman. Her eyes, wide with terror and a primal plea, stared up at him from a mask of mud and tears. Her hair, once arranged for celebration, was a matted ruin. She wore a tattered white gown, stained and heavy with earth. A bride, and she was large. Her generous frame, a stark contrast to the slender ideal, was evident even beneath the layers of dirt. As he finally pulled her free, her limbs stiff and unresponsive, she collapsed against him, a dead weight in his arms. He held her, a stranger's life trembling against his own. Her breath was shallow, ragged. And then a sound, a faint, almost imperceptible murmur, a wisp of a confession dragged from the depths of her violated spirit, a whisper that seemed to echo not just in the silent forest, but in the desolate chambers of Silas's own heart. He said, "I was unfit." The words were barely audible, slurred with exhaustion and the chilling cold, yet they resonated with a brutal finality, laying bare the profound cruelty that had brought her to this desperate burial. Silas wrapped his heavy woolen blanket around her, shielding her from the biting wind and the piercing gaze of the sky. Her body was stiff, chilled to the bone, and her breathing remained shallow, each inhale a struggle. He hoisted her gently, carefully into his arms. Her weight, substantial as it was, felt feather-light against the burden of the inhumanity he had just witnessed. He began the long, arduous journey back to his cabin, the path familiar, yet now burdened by an unexpected passenger and the haunting echo of her whispered words. The cabin, small and weather-beaten, appeared through the trees as a sanctuary of last resort. Inside, the air was cold and still, holding the stale scent of wood smoke and solitude. Silas laid her gently on his crude cot by the unlit hearth. Her face, now visible beneath the layers of grime, was bruised and pale, a map of recent torment. He moved with a practiced efficiency, stoking the embers into a roaring fire, its warmth slowly pushing back the cabin's icy grasp. He found a clean, if patched, tunic and trousers of his own, and a rough towel. Can you move?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rumble from disuse. He knelt beside her, a dipper of water in his hand. She shook her head weakly, her eyes fluttering open, then closing again as if the light, even the dim cabin light, was too much. He helped her sip the water, then carefully began to clean the mud from her face and hands. She flinched, not from pain, but from the gentle touch, her body primed for cruelty. As he peeled away the remnants of the tattered wedding gown, exposing the bruises blossoming across her skin, a deep, unsettling anger stirred within him. Her figure, indeed ample, was soft and yielding, a stark contrast to the cruel judgment that had deemed her unfit. It was a body designed for warmth and comfort, not for the cold anonymity of a shallow grave. He dressed her in his oversized clothes, which hung loosely but offered warmth. He prepared a weak broth, nourishing yet easy on a stomach unaccustomed to sustenance. He forced himself to be methodical, focusing on the immediate needs, pushing back the questions, the fury, the grim images that clawed at his mind. Her name, she managed to croak after a long silence, was Eleanor. Eleanor. The sound of it, a gentle melody, felt strange in the confines of his silent cabin. She ate slowly, meticulously, each spoonful of victory against despair. She didn't speak of what had happened, not yet. Her eyes, when they met his, were still wide with a terrified vulnerability. But now, a flicker of something new began to emerge, tentative gratitude and a searching curiosity. She watched him, constantly, silently, as if trying to decipher the unreadable depths of his own solitude. Silas, for his part, found himself watching her too. The way her breath hitched in sleep, the way she clutched the blanket, the way a small tremor would run through her when a branch scraped against the cabin wall. The murmur, unfit, hung in the air between them, an unspoken condemnation that seemed to have scarred them both, albeit in different ways. He was a widower, broken by loss. She a bride, broken by betrayal. They were two shattered vessels, brought together by an act of monstrous cruelty, seeking refuge in the shared silence of the wilderness. Days blurred into a quiet rhythm within the confines of the cabin, marked only by the shifting light outside the single window and the crackle of the hearth. Eleanor, still frail, began to move with more purpose. Her silence remained profound, a testament to the trauma she carried, but her eyes, no longer haunted by a constant terror, held a glimmer of something akin to resolve. She began to help, clearing away the meager meals, stoking the fire, her movements slow but deliberate. Silas watched her, his own grief a silent companion, yet no longer the sole occupant of his world. He observed the quiet strength in her, the way she pushed through her pain, never complaining, never demanding. Her presence, initially an imposition, then a duty, was slowly becoming something else, a subtle weight that balanced his own. One evening, as the fire cast dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls, Eleanor spoke, her voice still hoarse, but clearer. My father, he wanted a good match, profitable one. Thomas, he seemed keen. Until the wedding day. My father swore I was beautiful. But Thomas, when he saw me in the gown, he said I was a burden, unfit for his name, his family. A disgrace. Her voice cracked, a raw wound finally exposed. They took me to the woods. Thomas, his brother, and his father. They dug the hole themselves. Said it would teach me to accept my place. Silas listened, his face impassive, but his gut twisted with a cold, righteous fury. He offered no words of comfort, knowing none would suffice, but his gaze, steady and unwavering, conveyed a silent understanding, a shared outrage. He saw her, truly saw her, not as a victim, not as unfit, but as a woman who had endured unspeakable evil. The bond between them deepened, forged in the crucible of shared hardship and unspoken understanding. Eleanor discovered in Silas a quiet dignity, a man who, despite his own suffering, extended a profound, wordless kindness. She saw the lines of sorrow etched around his eyes, recognizing a kindred spirit. He, in turn, began to see past the fat bride and the victim, recognizing the resilience that shone through her pain, the quiet determination that had kept her alive. He had saved her body, but she, unknowingly, was beginning to mend his soul, filling the vast emptiness that Alara's death had left behind. Then, a sound broke the fragile peace of their sanctuary, the baying of hounds, too close, too purposeful. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching on the frozen earth outside. Silas moved instantly, his hand going to his rifle. "Stay low, Eleanor," he commanded, his voice a low growl. The blood drained from her face, but she nodded, her eyes wide with a familiar terror, yet now tinged with a new resolve. She had survived once. She would not be taken again. A harsh voice, male and confident, boomed from just beyond the cabin door. "Silas Thorne, we know you're in there. We saw the tracks. Hand over the woman. She's a thief, a runaway. We're here for what's ours." It was Thomas's voice, cold and arrogant. The terror that had gripped Eleanor loosened its hold, replaced by a surge of defiant anger. She was no thief. She was no runaway. She was Eleanor, a survivor. She met Silas's gaze, a silent promise passing between them. They were alone against the world, but they were no longer truly alone. The cabin door splintered under a heavy boot, and two figures, hulking and menacing, filled the doorway, their faces obscured by the dim light and the wide brims of their hats. One was Thomas, the other his brother, thicker and crueler. Silas, rifle raised, stood his ground, a silent sentinel before the cot where Eleanor lay huddled, ostensibly hidden beneath the blankets. "She's not here," Silas stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, a dangerous calm before a storm. "Don't play coy, Thorne," Thomas sneered, stepping inside, his eyes darting around the small space. "We know she came this way, and if she's not here, then you've helped a criminal, a disgrace." That's a hanging offense. As he took another step, his foot caught on a loose floorboard that Silas had deliberately left raised, sending him stumbling. In that instant, Eleanor, moving with an unexpected swiftness, rolled from the cot, grabbing a heavy iron skillet from beside the hearth. With a primal cry, she swung it, not at Thomas, but at the lamp hanging precariously from a hook above his head. Glass shattered, and the small, sputtering flame extinguished, plunging the cabin into sudden, suffocating darkness. A roar of frustration and pain filled the space as Thomas's brother stumbled, momentarily blinded. Silas, accustomed to the dark, moved like a phantom. The sharp crack of his rifle echoed, followed by a thud as one of the intruders went down. Thomas cried out, a mix of fear and rage, stumbling back towards the shattered doorway. He fired wildly, the shot tearing into the wall beside Silas, who had already shifted position. Another shot from Silas, calculated and precise, caught Thomas in the shoulder. A guttural scream ripped through the night as Thomas staggered out into the darkness, his brother's unconscious form dragged by one of the retreating accomplices who had waited outside. The baying of the hounds faded into the distance, their hunt aborted. Silence, heavy and fraught, descended once more. Silas lit a new lamp, his hands steady. His shoulder throbbed, a glancing blow from Thomas's wild shot. Eleanor was on her knees, the skillet still clutched in her hand, her chest heaving. Her face, smeared with ash and streaked with tears of terror and defiance, held a new light. Her vulnerability had not vanished, but it was now laced with an undeniable strength. She looked at Silas, a fierce, raw gratitude in her eyes, but also something more, a recognition of their shared survival, of the partner she had become in that desperate moment. The words unfit felt like a distant, absurd whisper against the vibrant pulse of life that now coursed through her veins. The following days were spent in a different kind of quiet. Eleanor tended to Silas's wound with a gentle, focused care, her touch light and sure. Their conversations, though still sparse, were deeper, tinged with the gravity of their recent brush with death and the unexpected intimacy it had fostered. She told him more of her life, of the small kindnesses she had known, of her dreams, simple and earnest. Silas, in turn, spoke of Alara, not with the crushing grief that had defined him, but with a quiet reminiscence, sharing fragments of a life he had once believed irrevocably lost. Eleanor listened, not with pity, but with a quiet understanding, a balm to his old wounds. The fat bride was no more. Eleanor stood taller, her movements more confident, her gaze direct. The societal judgment that had sought to bury her alive had failed. Instead, it had forged her, tempered her, revealing a spirit both resilient and compassionate. The murmur, he said, I was unfit, no longer defined her. It was a scar, yes, but also a testament to her survival, a quiet roar of defiance. And Silas, the widower swallowed by his grief, had found purpose not in forgetting, but in protecting, in witnessing, in simply being with someone who, like him, had known the crushing weight of profound loss and cruelty. He was no longer just a man waiting to fade. He was a protector, a companion, someone whose own quiet strength had helped another rise from the grave. The forest outside, once a somber, solitary world, now held the promise of shared silence, of footsteps walking side by side. Their future was unwritten, uncertain, but it was no longer shadowed by the past. The unspoken understanding that had bloomed between them in the cold, damp woods was a tender, fragile thing, yet far more enduring than any forced union. They had not sought each other, but life, in its brutal indifference, had brought them together, allowing them to find dignity and quiet solace in the most unexpected of places, transforming unfit into an unspoken testament to survival, resilience, and the enduring human spirit.